Hi, what's going on guys? It's Almond. Welcome back to another Wizard101 video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Morganthe boss rematch. Now, I know I've uploaded rematch videos in the past, and I kind of skipped out on a couple of them, so I never got around to uploading them, so I was like, hey, this is the perfect time to work on them. And on top of that, we recently did get a museum update. So within that museum update, it's the Chrysalis Museum. And during the museum, like the whole process, once you get to like gold tier, you're going to have to fight the Morganthe boss rematch. So a lot of people are going to be looking forward to, hey, how do I farm it, etc. So hey, perfect time for this video, of course. So if you do enjoy this type of content, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And also, don't forget to subscribe. Also, turn on your notifications, join Discord, everything like that. We're on the rise to 6K subs, and we're on the rise to 2K members in the Discord. So I appreciate everyone that joins the Discord, or leaves a comment, likes the video, or even subscribes. It helps me out a crap ton. But let's talk about where you can get this rematch. There's two ways that you can get this. Number one is going to the arena. In the arena, you can talk to this vendor right here, Raquel, and you can craft yourself a Morganthe rematch. But if you are going to be farming this not through a guild portal, craft it from here and then you can recharge it. So after you finish it, you'll get a trophy, which is a trophy that's shown on the little pedestal, I guess you could say. And you can turn it back to Raquel and you can save yourself some resources, and it's like basically half the cost, essentially around there. So it'll save you some resources, as well as you can get yourself some badges. So if you are working towards the Arc 2 boss rematches, which I have finished a while back, just never got around to uploading them, you can get yourself the 15 defeats, and as well as if you defeat it one time, you do get a gold key. And when you defeat it 25 times, it can be on standard, but you're going to be doing it the same amount of rounds anyways on standard and challenge mode, so you might as well do it on challenge mode. But once you do it 25 times, you can just craft the hat from here that she drops, as well as the robe. Now personally, I don't use the robes. Some people use them. It is up to you. PvE setup, I don't use them. I just use demonic robes. They're just objectively better. But for some reason, if you really want to use these for shadow rating and you're really obsessed with shadow rating, go for it. You can use those. And some people use them in PvP setups, which is a whole separate topic. The hats are good not only for some PvP setups, as well as for some advanced combat setups, just because they have a power pin on them. So it's kind of useful in my opinion. But keep in mind, Umbra gear is the exact same stat 1-to-1 copy as Wastelander and the current pack that we recently got, which is the Dark Jesters. People don't understand that, and I don't know why. I have to preface this. I even had to preface this in my comment section, but people don't understand that the Jester gear, the Wastelander gear, and the Umbra gear are literally 1-to-1 copies. The only difference is the Jester gear has different item cards, and of course the cosmetics between all three are completely different. You can get Jester gear from here that looks like the Shadow Jester. Walrus Wastelander gear is different because it's its own like look, right? If we pull up the Walrus Wastelander pack, you guys can quickly see it is its own separate style of look, so cosmetic wise, which you can see from the boots, the robe, etc. It's not literally the same cosmetic, but it's the same stat. So if you care about stat stuff, hey, there you go. Now you know a little bit more. And keep in mind, if you don't want to craft it from Raquel, if you are in a guild, you can go craft it via the museum. So if that's something you want to do, that is up to you. And I believe from what people were telling me is that you can also get the Morganthe Rematch key, which is like a 3-hour portal from the badges via the museum. So if you are into the whole museum stuff, go for it. I'll make a video talking about the museum soon. Just I want to prioritize certain stuff. So there's that. But now that you got how to get the gear, or like what gear is dropped from here, and how to get the rematch, let's talk about how the fight mechanic works for this fight, because it's a little bit more in depth. There's some strategies involved. There's 2 different strats I'm going to give you guys, as well as like one that's like faster animation and one as like just the traditional, it works for everybody. So I'll go over both strats. They're both going to be the same amount of rounds, because there's a hard cap on how many rounds you can like as like early as you can do this, because you have to wait for shad pips, etc. You guys will see in the strategies. But let's go over her cheats. Now, Morganthe has like kind of like 2 cheats essentially. The first one is called Feed the Darkness. Now, at the beginning of the first round, she will give each player a shadow in power. So it's basically like a card that you can donate an ally a shad pip. Kind of straightforward, or yourself. And then at the start of round 2, she will cast the same cheat but a different card. She'll give each player a Dark Nova spell card. So basically a shadow spell. And then she has her other cheat called Submit to Shadow. At the end of each round, Morganthe will cast a natural attack AoE on every single wizard. Now you can't use Megaton or anything like that. I know some people are going to ask, can you cheese this? Not real. No, like you really can't. But keep in mind though, the more shad pips that she does have, she will do more damage for her AoE at the end of the round. So keep that in mind. So you want to make sure that she doesn't get as much shad pips. And there's a way to circumvent that, which we'll talk about. So now that you got her cheats out the way, let's go over the strat for this fight. This is the strat that you're going to be doing. You're going to be having 4 wizards, doesn't matter, right? It can be any school for all of them. And if you want to have a balance in this fight, if you want to have a death, you can just use those people to cast Hex or Curse to circumvent some item cards. That is completely fine. But I wanted to make a strat where it's kind of just like universal for everybody, not limiting it. So it's, you have to have a balance and you have to have a death. So this is kind of can just be realistically anybody. So let's go over some gear that you're going to be using on each character. So whoever's in the first slot, you have to make sure you are using the Mushu gear. Now you might be wondering, what are you talking about? What is this Mushu gear? Now Takanobu, which is a gold key boss, he drops sword oil as well as he drops gear, but you can just use the sword oil to craft the gear. It's very straightforward. A lot of people have sword oil at this point, but there's a vendor outside that you can interact with. Has some really good gear. Now, not really as much like defensive wise because it doesn't have any defensive stats realistically, but if you want to specifically purchase the hat, robe, boots as well as the amulet from that vendor, it's really worth your while. I highly recommend that you have a person that does this because it'll make this fight a lot more easier and not have to like look around for item cards, because that vendor has all the item cards that you're going to be needing. So whoever's in the first slot, make sure you're using the hat, robe, boots and amulet, as well as socket on some shad rating triangles if you can. You don't care about pip cost, you don't care about accuracy, and you don't care about damage. You just really care about your health in this fight and just having your item cards. That's about it. So keep that in mind if you're person 1. Another thing is, if you wear the Mushu gear, the hat, robe, boots do give you shad rating, as well as you can equip a wand that gives shad rating as well, and then of course you have the triangle sockets. So if you do wear all of that, Morganthe has less of a chance of getting a shad, and she won't get it till round 4 or 5. But something I want to include as well. So it makes it so you take less damage in the fight, because the more shad pips she has, the more damage she does. Person 2, person 3, it's kind of straightforward. You're just going to be using some amulets and some item cards from like some certain sources, which we'll talk about. And it's very straightforward. And then person 4, which has an important build that you have to keep in mind. Now you are going to be scaled to level 100 when you do challenge mode of this. Now, what you do need to make sure is you have 71% shadow damage and 9% shadow pierce, which is very, very doable because a lot of gear has universal pierce at this point. If you want, there's even shadow pierce jewels that exist, which is pretty nice to have if you have those. I have those on some pieces of gear, so you know, have those if you can. If not, it's not a big deal. As well as 71 shadow damage. Now, of course, this is if you are scaled down. So I'm going to quickly show you how do you check that, because I know some people be like, how do I check my level 100 stats? So currently you can see I have my 170 stat. These are like my stats at 170. Now, if I go to Lady Desmonda Ramirez, you can interact with her in the arena and you can check level skill to exalted. Now you can see it says exalted level scaling applied. Now my stats are going to look a little bit more different. My health is going to be lowered, my damage is going to be lowered, as well as my pierce and other stats, right? So definitely check what your stats are and try to achieve that damage and pierce that I provided on screen. So keep that in mind. You can just go to the arena and check what your stats are looking like. Now, what if you're like, Almond, I can't reach those stats? Instead of passing on round 1, just have another person do an additional universal buff, because how this strat works and how the fight works is she's giving you that Nova particularly because you have to kill her with that Nova. She has basically immunity res against all the other schools. Now you could try your best to try to like brute force it, but I wouldn't recommend it. You just have to play around the game, which is just using Dark Nova. So if you really can't reach that 71% damage or that 9% pierce, realistically the easy fix is just putting on another buff and just using a treasure card balance blade. Now, if you are watching the video, you would understand what I'm saying. And if you're someone who skipped through the video, I don't know what to tell you, because there's a lot of information I have to tell you. So instead of passing, like I said, just incorporate a balance blade treasure card, and that's an easy fix. So if you can't reach those damage numbers and those pierce numbers, like I said, incorporate a balance blade treasure card and you're good to go. But we're doing passing just to like circumvent some time and lowering the damage and etc. So Now that we got all the way from the gear to like the important stat coverages, let's talk about what you're actually doing in this fight. So round one, you're just passing, right? Because we're trying to make this somewhat quick at the same time. You could apply more buffs, but it doesn't really matter. And you could incorporate a weakness and stuff like that, but it doesn't really matter as well because she won't be getting shad rating. If your person one is using that full Mushu set, it gives you a bunch of shad rating by default, and you also have triangle sockets that give you shad rating. So she won't get a shad pip till round 4 or 5. So her natural attacks aren't going to do as much damage to you, and you won't realistically die at all in this fight. So there's that. So now the fight actually starts at round 2. So person 1 is going to cast their Dragon Blade, which they get from their hat. And person 2 is going to be using a Bounce Blade, and it can be specifically the one from the Bazaar. There's plenty of amulets in the Bazaar that give you a Bounce Blade, specifically 25%. So look around in the Bazaar, you'll find one. And like, kid you not, you will find one. If not, there's vendors even as well in, I believe, Zafaria. So if you can't find one in the Bazaar, just go to Zafaria, buy the amulet, you're good to go. And then person 3, you're using the Shadow Empower as well as person 4 on the person that's actually hitting. So give them their 2 shads so then they can actually cast Nova the next round. Now we move on to round 3, where the person 1 is going to be using their Blade Storm that they get from their robe from that Mushu set, as well as person 2 is going to be using a pet item card Hex. Now, if you are balanced right here, you can use an item card from like a piece of gear that gives you, I believe like the Reaver boots give you like a Hex item card. If you're a Death, you probably have a Curse item card, I believe. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the balanced one gives you a Hex. But if not, just have a pet that gives you a Hex item card. Forlorn Sabretooth is just one of many pets that give you a Hex item card. If not, if you have a talent on a pet that gives you Hex, that works too. So either of those options work. Person 3 is going to be using Weakness or V-Plague. Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but it's just to circumvent some damage, and it just makes it so you're like living in this fight. Now, of course, you're not going to be taking as much damage, but if you're consecutively farming this, it does get tedious. So that's why we're adding Weakness and V-Plague. But if you want to, you can pass instead. That is an option. It is up to you. And then the last person is going to cast their Dark Nova, and whenever Dark Nova does its casting, it will also cast a 40% Shadow Blade on yourself. So don't worry about packing a 40% Shadow Blade from like a wand or something like the Malister wands. I don't even think they're 40% anyways. But Dark Nova will literally give you a 40% Shadow Blade. Then we move on to round 4. Person 1 is going to be casting their Bounce Blade from their boots, because those boots have an item card Bounce Blade that's a 30%. As well as second person is going to be using the Tear Jewel from Wallaroo or Salinopolis. Very easy to obtain. There's even wands that give Bounce Blade as well, so just make sure it's 25% and they will stack and you're good to go. Because since they're different percentages, they stack, so that's why it's something that you have to be wary about. But get the Tear Jewel, it's very easy to obtain. And then the third person is just going to be doing Weakness V-Plague once again, but like I said, you could pass if you want to. And then lastly, the last person is going to be casting a Treasure Card Hex. Very easy to obtain. You can get it from the Bazaar or even literally the library. The library has like an infinite source. So don't worry about getting Treasure Card Hexes. That's why the strat makes it viable. And then lastly, on the final round, person 1 is going to be casting that Hex that gives a 35% trap that's universal that they get from their amulet via the vendor from Mushu. As well as person 2 is going to be casting Intinuate. Now, if you don't want to cast Intinuate, if you don't know what it is, it's basically an aura where they take 20% incoming damage. Now, of course, if you don't want to use Intinuate, use a different buff. You can use a Bounce Blade treasure card, but Intinuate's very easy to get. So, highly recommend. It's a really amazing card. It's even in my training point guide, so definitely use that right there. And then the person in third slot is going to be using a pet item card called Curse, and it's a 30% trap that's universal. One of the many pets that have Curse on it is Reanimated Fossil, which you can get via the kiosk. But if you don't have a pet and you just like have like a talent that is on a pet that gives Curse, that works too. Same thing with the Hex that I was talking about earlier. If you have a pet that has the talent gives Hex card, that works too. It doesn't have to be specifically from those pets. I'm just giving you an option of many pets that exist currently. And then lastly, the last person is going to cast a Reinforce, and then at that same time, Dark Nova will cast, and it will basically kill Morganthe. It will do like some absurd amount, but I think it's just enough to just kill her by like a little bit more than normal, which is the whole premise behind this. But like I said, if you don't reach those damage numbers, like the 71 damage I said, and the 9% pierce, just incorporate another buff that's not on this list, and that just kind of fixes your problem. So there's that. So now that we got that strat out the way, I know took a minute to talk about, but we can talk about the other strat, which does make this faster animation wise, but it is kind of pay to win. So there is that. I do want to talk about that. So this is why I went over two strats. This one's kind of more like user friendly for people who don't buy bundles or anything like that, and just kind of like makes it easier for like the casual player. Now this next setup is a little bit more pay to win heavy, but it is faster animation wise. So if you do care about like, if you are farming the museum, or if you are farming multiple attempts and you want to try to make it as fast as you possibly can, well, this is your strategy. So that strategy consists of one main thing, which is your person that's hitting has to have 80% damage for shadow, as well as they must have one of these two hats from a bundle. There's a chromatic blast from, I believe, the Shard Warrior bundle, which is the one I use, which you probably are seeing in the background when I talk about footage wise, as well as there's an item card on a bundle called the Battle Mage bundle, which gives you a Justice Blade item card. Now I know I pull out the most crazy cards for strats, but this is just something that I want to talk about. And some people might see Justice Blade and be like, what are you talking about? So first, let's talk about Chromatic Blast. So Chromatic Blast is on a hat, which I'm going to show you guys real quick on screen, is from right here. I think it's called the Shard Warrior. I think I have, yeah, right here, Shard Warrior. I have it stitched, of course, but it gives you a item card of a 5% blade per pip. Now, of course, you have to use a balance mastery to use this, because so you can benefit your power pips on it, which is very easy to obtain. So definitely just keep that in mind if you are going to be using Chromatic Blast. Have to have a balance mastery to activate it, because you want the power pips to work too. But basically, it's a 5% blade per pip, and it's not banned. So yeah. So if you do the math, you should get 65% blade on round 5 if you have 100% power pips and you have a balance mastery. So very good. Chromatic Blast is on a bunch of different cards. I mean, the different pieces. I think it's like on a pair of boots. I think it's like the Snowdrifter boots, as well as like the Unicorn boots or something like that. So if you have one of those, just swap it. You know what I mean? But you just have to have the item card, right? As well as there's Justice Blade. Now, not many people would know this card exists, but if you have the Battle Mage bundle at level 110 or above, you get this item card called Justice Blade. Now, it gives you a 35% Universal Blade, as well as a 35% Shadow Blade. And these stack. Now, reading this, you might be like, oh, they probably don't, but they do, because it's a Universal Blade as well as a Shadow Blade. So when you are using your Nova, this basically works. And if you do the math, if you basically add these two blades together, you basically get a 70% blade, which is equivalent to a feint. So yeah, this is the only time you're ever going to be using this, because it's a shad, right? It's a shad hit. You're not using shad hits all the time in like challenge modes and stuff. So the basic gimmick behind this is you're still using the person one that has Mushu gear, as well as you're still having the last person with like pretty good damage. Just keep in mind, if you are using Chromatic Blast, just have a balance mastery. I'm not going to write it on the slide, but keep that in mind. But we're still passing round 1, and then round 2 we're going to be using Dragon Blade, the one that gives like a 35% blade. Person 2 is going to be using a curse item card that can be from a pet, or it can be on a talent, so keep that in mind. And then we're still doing the shadow and power stuff. And then the following round, we're doing that balance blade from the boots. And then we are casting a hex. It can be an item card from a talent or a pet, or if you are a balance, you probably already have boots that you can use. So, and then there's also person 3 who's going to be doing weakness or V-Plague. If you feel confident, you think you're not going to die, and you don't want to if you're going to potion up at the end, doesn't really matter. You can just pass instead of weaknessing or V-Plaguing. And then we're going to be casting our Nova. And then finally we get to round 4, where we're casting the Hex from the Amulet. We're also casting Mass Hex. So Mass Hex you can get from multiple different sources. Mass Hex you can get from a wand. There's 3 different wands. There should be Wastelander, as well as the Umbra wand, which you can get from the rematches. And then as well as there's the Professor wand. So it's 3 different ways you can get it from a wand. Now, of course, if you want to use an amulet, you can find it in the bazaar, but the bazaars have been wacky lately, so that might, make you struggle a little bit. So that's a thing. And then on person 3, we're just doing weakness, V-Plague, or pass. One of those 3 options will work. And then lastly, we're going to hit with the reinforce, because we need that 40% aura, right? And then lastly, on the final round, we're just doing double pass into a Dragon Blade, and it has to be specifically for my pet. So because the reason behind that is because person 1 is already doing a 35% blade. Now you have to do a dragon blade that's different from them. So there's plenty of pets that have dragon blade, and you just cast that on the last person. The last person is going to either cast chromatic blast. If you are using chromatic blast, have a balance mastery, or if you're going to use justice blade, just cast that, and there you go. So the only differences between both of these strats is that the fact is it's less animation, and basically it's pay to win. That's realistically it. Now, of course, if you don't care about using chromatic blast or justice blade, do the first strat. But the only difference is the first strat requires more animations, while this next strat is like kind of more pay to win, and you actually have to have be like kind of locked in and have all the item cards and stuff. So there's that, and there's no TC involved other than person 3. But if person 3 is a death or a balance, they can just use main deck weakness or main deck V plague. You can use item card V plagues if you have those on certain pieces of gear, but if you don't feel like using any weaknesses, you can just pass. So there's that. But there's your strategies for your Morganthe rematch. You got your 2 different strats. Now, of course, there's other strats for this. There's plenty of other strats, but you got to keep in mind this fight, all it is just universal buff stacking into a hit. If you have other universal buffs, go for it. But I try to keep mine consistent, and people can just keep in mind like where to get stuff instead of communicating with another like, hey, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have this? Do you have that? I just kind of just made it straightforward just so people don't get confused, and where you can get all these item card buffs, because there's plenty item card buffs. But yeah, I can go for hours talking about different item cards, but this is just what I'm going to be doing, and this is what I would recommend if anything like that. So there's that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully your Morganthe rematches go well. You either get your badge that you're looking forward to, or maybe you're trying to go for the museum and you're trying to unlock the museum stuff. Hey, there you go, you got your strategy for that as well. But that is it for me. Leave a like, subscribe, all type of stuff. Don't forget to join Discord. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to comment on the video. Let me know what you think about Justice Blade and Chromatic Blast. Crazy spells, but hey, they're amazing spells. That's all you need to know. But yeah, that's it for me, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys.